Brands like Apple and Nike spend billions shaping how the world sees them. If you are asked to describe what they stand for, a strong brand is clear. Brands that you've not heard of, or ones that you consider poorly or just don't know about, tend to fade and fail. But what about you? What are your brand values? Have you ever stopped to think what your personal brand says about you? To think what maybe others are saying about you? Today, we're joined by Helen Nicholson, author of 2 books, Mindfulness, How to Stay Sane in an Insane World, and Networking for Introverts. Helen, welcome to the Emirates World podcast and onto this Emirates flight.
Wonderful to be here.
Personal brands, is that something that most people think about?
No, I don't think they do. Often it happens by accident. I'll meet people in their 30s or 40s. We do a lot of leadership development work. And then people wonder why they are in a cul-de-sac in their careers. And they often have an over-reliance on their work. They say their work should speak for themselves. They haven't necessarily connected the dots between their personality, their behavior, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their work. Your work is a part of your brand, but it's not everything.
So your performance isn't really how you should be measured?
It's an element of it. And increasingly, as your career develops, your good work becomes a given. There are lots of people who can do that work, but your secret sauce, your uniqueness is really what I think we were put on this planet to uncover. There's a reason why we are different. So personal branding in many ways relates to your purpose. It's uncovering that purpose. So it's not a destination. It's not something you're going to arrive at when you're 35. I think it is our life's work, is to uncover your purpose and then expand on it, go deeper into it. And it needs to keep on being reinvented. A brand like Coca-Cola, for example, you wonder why they still advertise, where everyone in the world, no matter even if they speak English or not, knows the word Coca-Cola. Why do they still advertise? Because they know they've got to stay relevant. Good brands will keep on growing. They'll keep on learning, expanding. And I think in exactly the same way, good people's personal brands need to do the same.
By this, are you saying that, people say, oh, he's difficult or he's really helpful? That's part of the brand?
Indeed.
But how can somebody sit down and say, okay, I'm going to paint a picture of my personal brand and then kind of manipulate it into reality?
First of all, a good personal brand is built around your strengths and not your weaknesses. And one of the things that I notice with a lot of the people we train is that they are more in touch with their weaknesses than they are with their strengths. And if you think of big personal brands like Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Oprah, they knew what they were good at and they leaned into those natural strengths and then they outsourced their weaknesses. And people who understand branding well will do that. We're all good at many things or not good at other things. If you spend most of your career trying to fix your weaknesses, then you end up with very strong weaknesses. I don't believe that's our life's purpose. I believe our life's purpose is to uncover this unique ability. What are the 2 or 3 things that I was put on this planet to do? Find out what they are, package that value, and then communicate that value through your network.
So imagine you're, say, a 32-year-old woman, you're good at your job, you're respected for the work you do, but you're not getting on in your career. What would you think would be a good strategy for them to do?
Well, first of all, I think, to identify who the meaningful stakeholders are in your work, and are you communicating your value to them on a regular basis? Because one of the mistakes that I see people make in their careers, they put their personal brand in the hands of one person, which is often their boss. And that is a very bad career strategy, regardless of whether you have a great or a bad boss, because it's putting all your eggs in one basket. And that is a dangerous strategy. That person could leave, that person could be promoted to another area, and then suddenly all your personal branding capital is only in the hands of one person and it disappears. So I think, first of all, to realize that you've got to have a strategic approach to communicating what you good at, what you're busy with, what projects you've been involved in. So that's the first thing. And the vehicle that you're able to do that with is through your network. People have got to expand their network beyond their immediate role, especially in big organizations. They've got to look at, are you regularly having coffees with people who are not your obvious stakeholders? I think there's hard power and soft power in big corporates, and it's important to make sure that you're accessing both.
You've talked about things like punctuality, the way you respond or how quickly you respond to emails. Are you a complainer? How's your voice? How much energy you have? The appearance, whether you're well dressed or not, whether you're distracted, maybe on the phone all the time. These are the core brand values. So let's say you sit down and you assess each of those areas and you say, oh, I'm lacking. Are you suggesting that people need to address each of those areas and make sure that their brand is kind of tip top?
I think those are brand behaviors that sometimes we can become famous for and not in a good way.
And they're nothing to do with your work.
Indeed, you can often get known as the person who's always late, and that will become what you are famous for in the organization, regardless of how good your work is.
And you'll get passed up for promotion.
I mean, we had a delegate last year who told me that she did not get promotion because her LinkedIn profile was not updated. And this was within the same organization. This wasn't even in a new organization, because they believed by her not regularly updating her LinkedIn profile, which is the shop front of your personal brand, her organization felt it meant she didn't take her personal brand seriously. And in this new role, they wanted someone who took their personal brand seriously.
What's the most important aspect of a personal brand?
I think authenticity. It's to be you, but to be the best you that you can be. I sometimes meet people who say, I'm very different in my personal life than I am in my professional life. A lot of us are more comfortable in our personal life with people who we are more relaxed with. But at the same time, I think it takes too much energy being a very different person at home and at work. The more similar and the more, people can actually feel the authenticity of who you are, people like that, and people want to deal with people who are real.
You've written a lot about burnout. What is burnout?
Burnout, I've noticed, is quite subtle sometimes, especially amongst high-achieving individuals. It's not that you suddenly can't get out of bed and you can't function. There is that level of burnout, but the more subtle signals that I've noticed is when a person who is normally very passionate about their work suddenly starts to become quite jaded and cynical about either their organization or their work, and they stop feeling fulfilled by that work, and they start feeling very critical and negative. That often can be one of the first signs that I've observed.
And how do you recommend that's addressed?
Go back to your brand and your purpose. Is this job fulfilling your purpose? So that's number one. And number two is, are you managing your energy? Because often that is not the case. Are you sleeping well? I think you've got to look at the different levers you can pull, because what I have noticed is 90% of people are actually not sleeping well across the world in all the work that I do. And if you're not sleeping well, I speak about it in our work, you can't be brave if you're not well. And the sleep will completely impact your well-being. And then bravery is impossible, because then you're in complete survival mode. You're just going through the motions.
Are you saying that people really aren't connecting the dots between getting a good night's sleep and performing well at work?
Increasingly, there is a shift. I think in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, if you think of movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, they used to say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And people used to wear their sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. Whereas I think Jeff Bezos, for example, obviously one of the wealthiest men in the world, he sleeps unashamedly for 8 to 9 hours. And he speaks proudly of that fact. And I think that has also marked a shift and change. And he speaks about how he's a better leader, how he's a better strategist, how he's just a better human being when he gets enough sleep. So I think that business people are actually becoming aware of the power of that. That sleep when you're dead was very increasingly old-fashioned.
Like a sports person, you need to be in good condition to perform well at work.
I think we can actually learn a lot from sports people. Sports people understand energy management and performance a lot better than people in business do, because every sports team or sports person will have recovery built into their schedule, whereas often business people are expected to perform relentlessly and there's no recovery built in. And I think that that's one of the lessons as business people we can learn from sports.
There'll be people listening to this that say, Helen has no idea how much stress I'm under and what it's like in the real world. How do you talk to that?
I always ask people, how do you work? Because often we are not working optimally in some ways. One of my big epiphanies in this work was that multitasking does not serve us. And a lot of people are task switching all day long. So they're busy doing a document or they're working on their email, and then emails are popping in, and then they swap and then they go and look at that. It takes 8 to 11 minutes every time we dilute our attention. So for you to bring your attention back to the original task. And our brain, if you're aware of the neuroscience of multitasking, our brain is actually a single processing unit. It doesn't like doing that, and it's not good at it. So that's why we get to the end of the day, we feel exhausted, but we often haven't accomplished much, because our brain actually likes to get one task and go deep into that task. So I think, when people say, you don't understand how busy I am, how much stress I've got, first of all, look at, are you task switching all day? And if you're doing periods of deep work, even if it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes maximum, where you switch off your phone, you switch off your email notifications, and you do one thing properly, doing that deep work, that is a game changer. And then you'll find people start to feel happy, they start to feel more productive, and their brain actually starts to fire. This business of us scattering our attention on, numerous things just is not serving us.
But then surely if I'm focused on this and I'm not answering emails in 3 seconds, I'm going to get a reputation that I'm a slow responder on the emails.
It's important to communicate that to your boss and your stakeholders, that every morning between 8 and 9:30, I do deep work, and let that be known. There are very few crises that they can wait for an hour or an hour and a half. When my twins were little, they used to come to me crying, and I said to them, is there blood? And if there was no blood, then it's not a crisis. And I think we often in organizations get addicted to this crisis kind of mentality where people are sending emails at 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. And I don't think that's sustainable for teams' high performance.
So multitasking is multi-failing and the driver of stress.
Yes. One of the interesting things about people's thinking is often our first thought is not our best thought. We've actually got to go deeper. And, if you're constantly multitasking, then you generally are stopping at that first thought.
You talk about the importance of having a full stop at the end of the day. Can you explain that?
Well, when we're in meetings and we have hard stops, it means that everyone's going to go on to the next meeting. And I think we need hard stops at the end of our working day. So we need to put some activities that mark the end of your working day and that you're now transitioning into your rest and recovery time. I have 3. One is I have a bath, I change my clothes because that signifies we are now done with the day. I also deleted my email notifications from my phone because I found that got in the way of my full stops. I sit down on the couch with my husband and we connect without a device, and we also go for a walk. And then I have recovery rituals on the weekend. I have a monthly recovery ritual and a yearly recovery ritual. And I'd like to encourage anyone who's listening to this is to move away from one annual holiday, to try and get more regular 3-day breaks. My research in my book indicated 2 days is generally not enough. We need to have 3 days, and to try and plan for them, in advance for the year. And you'll find that then you don't keep on waiting until you're exhausted, because that's what often happens. People only plan breaks when they're feeling literally at the end of their tether. And then what happens is when you then do go and have a break, you often get sick because your body is actually just collapsing then. So you want to catch yourself every time that your energy is dipping. And I think it should be every 2 months, to plan these 3-day breaks, because you're catching yourself as your energy dips, then you have a break and you're ready to rock and roll.
Helen Nicholson, thank you so much for being on today's flight.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.